At our baby's gender reveal party, my husband's phone kept buzzing. Annoyed, I glanced at the screen, a message from my queen Reed. Does she know yet? Confused, I opened it. The next text made my blood run cold. Your baby isn't his. My hands shook as I looked at my husband. He was laughing with his mother. I whispered, whose baby is it then? His mother's smile dropped. Then she said something that left everyone speechless. At our baby's gender reveal party, my husband's phone kept buzzing. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just family and friends texting him. But after the fifth or sixth vibration, my patience wore thin. We were in the middle of something special, something we had planned for weeks. I glanced at the screen. The message preview from my queen read, "Does she know yet?" My stomach twisted. I wasn't sure why, but something about those words made my heart race. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a friend messing around. Then another message popped up. Your baby isn't his. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started shaking as I picked up his phone. The room around me blurred. Laughter and chatter from family and friends became distant noise. I looked up at my husband. He was standing a few feet away, laughing with his mother, completely unaware that his life was about to change. My mouth felt dry. I swallowed, tried to steady my voice, and whispered, whose baby is it then? The room wasn't loud before, but now it felt silent. His mother, who had been mid-laugh, suddenly stopped. Her face went pale. And then she said something that made the entire room freeze. She looked at me, her smile gone. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a second, I thought she was going to deny everything. But then, she exhaled sharply and glanced at my husband, her son. His laughter faded. He looked between me and his mother, his brow furrowing. What? He asked, completely oblivious. His mother swallowed hard, then said in a low voice, we should talk about this later. The room, filled with friends and family, felt smaller, tighter. Eyes darted toward us. Conversations had stopped. Even the kids, who had been running around just minutes ago, stood still. No, I said, gripping the phone so tight my fingers ached. We talk about it now. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. My husband frowned, stepping closer. What's going on? His eyes flicked down to his phone in my hand. When he saw the messages, his expression changed. I waited for him to deny it, to be confused, to demand answers. Instead, his face went blank. Completely blank. That's when I knew. I turned the phone around so everyone could see the words on the screen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My best friend clapped a hand over her mouth. His father's face turned red. Who is she? My voice was steadier now. I had gone past the shock. Now I wanted answers. He didn't respond. His mother, however, stepped forward and reached for my arm. Please, honey, don't do this here, she pleaded. Let's go somewhere private. I yanked my arm away. No, we're going to do this now. Everyone here deserves to know. I turned back to my husband. Who is she? His jaw clenched. Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. It's not what you think. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Really? Because it looks like you've been having an affair and now some woman thinks this baby isn't yours. I felt my stomach twist again at those words. This baby, my baby, the one I had been carrying, loving, dreaming about. I placed a hand on my belly without thinking. My chest ached. He didn't say anything, but his mother did. And when the words left her mouth, the room went so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. She's not just some woman. The weight of those words hit me before I even fully understood them. My eyes flicked between her and my husband. What? I whispered. She hesitated, then exhaled, almost like she had been holding it in for too long. She's family. A murmur spread through the room. Someone cursed under their breath. My best friend looked like she was about to pass out. I took a step back, shaking my head. What the hell does that mean? His mother looked at my husband again, as if waiting for him to say something. When he didn't, she turned back to me. It's his cousin. The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at her, blinking, waiting for my brain to catch up. Then the realization slammed into me. I took another step back. No, I said. No, that's not, but I saw it. In his face. In his mother's face. The way they weren't denying it. My stomach turned. Oh my God, someone whispered. I pressed a hand to my mouth, feeling like I might throw up. The woman my husband had been cheating with. The one texting him. The one who thought this baby wasn't his. It was his own cousin. And somehow I knew this was only the beginning. My breath came in short, uneven gasps. My vision blurred at the edges. The room swayed. I had expected denial, excuses, anything but this. But there it was. Out in the open. My husband had been cheating on me with his own cousin. And she thought this baby wasn't his. I forced myself to look at him. His face was still blank, but I saw it now, not shock, not confusion. Just resignation. Like he had known this moment would come. Like he had been waiting for it. I felt sick. Say something, I whispered. My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. He swallowed. It's complicated. Complicated. The word made me snap. I let out a sharp laugh, too hollow to be real. Complicated? I repeated. You had an affair with your cousin. And now, at our baby's gender reveal, I find out she thinks this baby isn't even yours. What part of this isn't complicated? His mother stepped in again, her voice soft. Please, we should shut up. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. She flinched, eyes widening, but I didn't care. I was done. I turned back to my husband. Is it true? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. My hands curled into fists. Oh my God, I whispered. It's true. How long? His Adam's apple bobbed. A while. My stomach twisted again. I shook my head, feeling tears sting the corners of my eyes. How long? I asked again, my voice sharp, shaking. He exhaled. 2 years. I staggered back like I had been hit. A murmur spread through the room. I heard my best friend whisper, Jesus Christ. 2 years. We had been married for 3. Oh my God. I sucked in a breath, trying to keep myself upright. My legs felt weak. My body didn't feel like mine. I pressed a hand to my belly again, like I could somehow protect my child from the reality crashing down around me. 2 years, I repeated, my voice barely there. So, this whole time? He didn't say anything. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to think, trying to make sense of any of this. Then I remembered the messages. Your baby isn't his. I opened my eyes and locked onto him. Why does she think this baby isn't yours? His lips parted slightly, but before he could answer, another voice spoke. A woman's voice. Because it isn't. The room turned. Every head. Every pair of eyes. And then I saw her. She was standing at the back of the room, just beyond the group of guests. I hadn't noticed her before, probably too caught up in my own hell to scan the crowd properly. But there she was. Tall. Dark hair. Familiar eyes. Too familiar. His cousin. The woman my husband had been sleeping with for 2 years. My body went completely still. I hadn't seen her in months. Not since a family wedding last year, where she and my husband had barely interacted in front of me. Now I knew why. I could barely breathe. What did you just say? She stepped forward, her chin lifted, her expression unreadable. I said it isn't his. I stared at her. How the hell would you know that? Her eyes flicked toward my husband for the briefest second before she turned back to me. Because I'm pregnant too. The air left my lungs. A loud gasp echoed from somewhere in the room. Someone cursed under their breath. I felt my best friend's hand grab my arm like she thought I might collapse. My ears were ringing. What? I finally choked out. She took another step forward. I'm pregnant. She looked down, pressing a hand to her stomach. It wasn't obvious yet, no bump, no real sign. But I knew she wasn't lying. I could feel it. I turned to my husband. His face had changed now. No longer blank. No longer frozen. Now, he just looked tired. You got her pregnant? My voice cracked. He didn't answer. I let out a breathless laugh. Oh my God. Then something clicked. I turned back to her. That still doesn't explain why you think this baby isn't his. She didn't say anything at first. Then she looked at me, her expression unreadable. Because I know who the father is. The room was dead silent. My heart slammed against my ribs. Who? She hesitated, just for a second. But that second was enough. I knew. I knew. I took a step back, shaking my head. No, I whispered. She exhaled, looking almost apologetic. It's your brother. The floor tilted. I swayed. A hand grabbed my arm, my best friend again, trying to steady me. But it was too late. Everything around me shattered. The room felt like it had been drained of air. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything except the weight of her words. It's your brother. My breath hitched. My body went completely still. No. No, no, no. This wasn't real. This wasn't happening. I looked at my husband first, expecting, praying for denial. A reaction. A flicker of anger, confusion, anything. But he just stood there, his expression unreadable, his hands clenched into tight fists. I turned to her. My husband's cousin. My brother's, whatever the hell she was to him. She wasn't lying. I could see it. The horror set in slowly, like my brain was trying to process it piece by piece instead of all at once. My brother. The bile rose in my throat. I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. Then someone spoke. Oh my God. It was my mother. She had been standing off to the side, clutching her hands together, her face pale. And then the room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Shouting. Someone knocked over a drink. My best friend let out a sharp curse. My father demanded answers, his voice booming over the chaos. But I wasn't listening. I turned to my husband, my throat raw. Did you know? He blinked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Did you know? I screamed. His lips parted. Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. Something inside me shattered. I let out a breathless laugh, shaking my head. You've known. He nodded, eyes dark, shoulders heavy. For a while. For a while. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push away the dizziness creeping in. I could feel the walls closing in, the weight of the betrayal suffocating me. You're telling me, I said slowly, voice shaking, that you've been sleeping with your cousin for 2 years. You got her pregnant. And now, she's having a baby with my brother? The words tasted like poison. She exhaled sharply. It wasn't. I snapped my head toward her. Shut the hell up. Her mouth clamped shut. The sound of my father's voice broke through. Where is he? It took me a second to realize what he meant. My brother. My stomach twisted. He wasn't here. He hadn't come to the gender reveal. He had said he had a work emergency. Now I wondered if that had been a lie. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking, and called him. It rang twice before he picked up. Hey, he said, casual, like my entire world hadn't just imploded. Where are you? My voice came out tight. A pause. Home. Why? I clenched my teeth. Get here. Now. Another pause. What? Why? What's going on? I said get here. He must have heard something in my voice, because he didn't argue. Just let out a short breath and said, all right. I'm on my way. I hung up. The next 10 minutes were a blur. The guests didn't leave, even though I wished they would. The whispers didn't stop. My mother kept pacing, my father stood in the corner with his arms crossed, face dark with rage, and my husband, my cheating, lying husband, just sat down, rubbing a hand over his face like he was exhausted. I was numb. Then, the door opened. And there he was. My brother stepped inside, brows furrowed. What's going on? The moment his eyes landed on her, his expression changed. Just for a second. A flicker of something. And I knew. I took a step forward, my chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. You son of a bitch. His head snapped toward me. What? I threw the phone, not at him, but at the floor, right at his feet. It bounced once before settling. He looked down. The screen was still lit up. The texts. The proof. His face paled. My voice cracked. How could you? Silence. Then, slowly, he turned to her. His mouth opened, but he didn't speak. My best friend whispered, oh my God. And then, chaos. My father lunged. My mother screamed. My husband stood up, grabbing his father when he moved toward my brother. People were shouting over each other. My best friend tried to pull me away, but I didn't move. I just stood there, shaking, staring at the man I had called my brother my entire life. I trusted you, I whispered. He finally looked at me. His face twisted. I didn't mean don't. I shook my head, hot tears burning my eyes. You destroyed everything. I turned to my husband. And you. You knew. You knew and you still let me believe, my voice cracked. I pressed a hand to my chest, struggling to breathe. I hate you. His eyes flickered with something pain? Regret? I didn't care. And then I turned back to her. The woman who had ruined everything. Was it worth it? I asked. My voice was calm now. Too calm. She hesitated. Then, softly, she said, no, that was the moment something inside me broke. Not in anger, not even in sadness. Just finality. This was over. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? My mother asked, her voice desperate. I wiped at my face. Anywhere but here. My best friend grabbed my arm. I'll come with you. I nodded, too drained to respond. I took one last look around the room. My father was still seething, my mother crying, my brother standing stiff, my husband looking lost, and his cousin, the mother of my brother's child, just staring at the floor. And then I left. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I spent the night at my best friend's place, curled up on her couch, staring at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just existed. The next morning, my phone was filled with missed calls. My mother, my father, my husband, my brother. I ignored them all. Because in that moment, I knew two things. 1, my marriage was over. 2, my child would never be raised in that mess. I had a baby to think about. And for the first time in a long time, I was putting myself and my child first.